Good morning, club members. We digest world-class journalism and talk it through in plain English. Here are 5 stories worth your time. Qatar has cut its government department budgets by up to 30%. That sudden decision comes after the country completely halted its production of liquefied natural gas. For 6 months, the war between the US, Israel and Iran has battered the Gulf. Iranian strikes damaged critical gas facilities on Qatari soil. At the same time, tankers cannot safely travel through the narrow Strait of Hormuz. That combination has closed off the export routes that fund the entire state. Natural gas is not just an industry for Qatar. It is the primary source of government revenue and national income. Without gas sales, the International Monetary Fund expects Qatar's economy to shrink sharply. The forecast points to a contraction of 8.6% this year. That would be the deepest economic drop among all 6 Gulf nations. To deal with the shortfall, ministers in Doha are pulling back on state spending. The total annual budget for 2026 stands at roughly $61 billion. Department heads must now find ways to run their offices with far less money. The government has also reduced its overseas aid budget by about 85%. At first glance, this level of belt-tightening might seem surprising for such a rich country. Qatar manages a sovereign wealth fund worth $500 billion. Its entire resident population is only 3.2 million people. In theory, that enormous wealth should offer plenty of protection during hard times. However, a sovereign wealth fund mostly owns long-term assets around the world. It owns foreign real estate, company shares, and international bonds. Selling those global assets in a rush can be messy and expensive. Qatar has already used emergency financial reserves to keep its local banks stable. Officials know that cash buffers can only cover budget holes for so long. Doha is currently working as a mediator to help broker peace between Washington and Tehran. A diplomatic breakthrough would allow gas plants to restart and tankers to sail again. If the war continues into the final months of the year, deeper spending cuts will follow. The question now is how long even a wealthy petrostate can manage without its main engine. Moving to our second story, we look at another sudden scramble for resources. This time, the global race is over critical minerals and rare earth metals. We need these materials for electric cars, wind turbines, and advanced weapons. They are difficult to mine and expensive to refine cleanly. Right now, China controls the vast majority of the world's supply. Both Washington and Brussels want to break that foreign monopoly quickly. However, the 2 Western allies are moving at very different speeds. Washington is opening its checkbook and taking bold financial risks. Over the past 2 years, the Americans promised $40 billion. They are not just handing out traditional research grants. The American government is buying direct stakes in private mining firms. The Pentagon even invested $400 million in a key domestic producer. They also signed a 10-year deal to guarantee minimum metal prices. At the same time, American diplomats helped their firms secure mines across Africa. Meanwhile, European leaders are taking a much slower and cautious route. Brussels recently selected 75 strategic projects in mining, processing and recycling. Their main promise to companies is faster permits and simpler rules. Yet, Europe committed only €6 billion this year. Unlike in America, European projects receive no guaranteed public funding. European industry leaders are now sounding the alarm. They say European officials talk too much, over-regulate and lose valuable time. In 18 months, Washington completed more deals than Europe managed in a decade. To make matters worse, American money is already buying European assets. One American-backed firm recently acquired a British rare earths company. That same firm also bought a stake in a French processing business. European auditors already warn that most European projects will arrive too late. They are unlikely to meet the European Union's targets for 2030. Brussels intends to present a new raw materials strategy this autumn. European officials admit they must start using serious financial power. They want to partner with dependable countries such as Canada and Japan. Working closely with Washington feels unpredictable because American politics can shift rapidly. Yet, without fast state backing, Europe cannot build its own independent supply. The core fear in Brussels is quite straightforward. Europe set out to end its dangerous dependence on China. Instead, it might simply end up completely dependent on the United States. For our third topic today, we turn from global supply chains to medical science. Doctors have spent decades trying to teach our immune systems to fight cancer. For a very long time, cancer vaccines simply did not work. Billions of pounds were spent, but the field became famous for broken promises. The original idea sounded straightforward enough. Tumours produce abnormal mutated proteins known as neoantigens. If your immune system recognizes these altered proteins as foreign, it destroys the cell. In reality, early vaccines focused on a single protein. Tumours quickly adapted and stopped making that specific protein altogether. Even worse, many tumours produce chemical shields that turn off our immune defences. That all began to change with the arrival of checkpoint inhibitors. These modern drugs disable the tumour shield so immune cells can attack freely. Scientists then asked a sensible question. What happens if you combine a cancer vaccine with these shield-breaking drugs? To test that, they needed a way to build custom vaccines very quickly. Traditional vaccine production was far too slow for individual patients. That is where messenger RNA technology stepped into the picture. With mRNA, scientists can analyze a patient's tumour and make a custom vaccine in weeks. Recent trial results for a skin cancer called melanoma have just arrived. In this trial, patients first had their tumours surgically removed. They then received a personalised mRNA shot alongside a standard checkpoint drug. The data shows that this combination clearly slowed the return of the disease. Surgery often leaves tiny clusters of hidden cancer cells behind. The vaccine teaches the immune system to hunt down those remaining rogue cells. Clinicians are understandably excited by the news, yet there are several sensible reasons to remain cautious. Slowing the return of a tumour does not automatically mean patients will live longer. We also do not know how much this custom manufacturing process will cost. It could easily produce a very modest medical benefit at immense expense. Furthermore, melanoma is unusually good at provoking an immune response. A treatment that works on skin cancer might struggle against quieter tumours. Drug companies are now launching trials for lung, bladder, and kidney cancers. Those future results will show whether we have truly found a new path forward. For our fourth topic, we move from medical science to the politics of war. Ukraine is currently fighting a brutal invasion, and its laws strictly ban wartime elections. Yet a prominent former defense minister has just made a surprising demand. Mikhailo Fedorov was removed from his government post in the middle of July. Late one evening, he released a 9-minute video that quickly grabbed public attention. He called on President Volodymyr Zelensky to hold national elections without delay. Fedorov argued that democracy must not become a hostage to Russian aggression. In his view, letting Moscow decide when Ukrainians vote shows dangerous weakness. He knew that his own chances of returning to office were very small. Parliament had just confirmed his successor by 312 votes to 2. Instead, his public message was an attempt to shake up the national leadership. On the surface, his argument sounds like a principled defense of democratic rights. Yet running a national election during wartime creates enormous practical hurdles. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers are fighting on the front lines. Millions of displaced citizens are living abroad or far away from home. Holding a fair ballot requires open public debate and safe voting booths. Neither of those conditions is easy to guarantee while missiles hit major cities. Because of those severe risks, public polling shows most Ukrainians oppose elections today. Even several lawmakers who normally support Fedorov called his proposal reckless. So why did this unexpected challenge surface right now? The call landed during a painful and embarrassing moment for President Zelensky. State detectives recently launched fresh anti-corruption inquiries against several close presidential allies. One senior deputy in the presidential office was dismissed on the very same day. These investigations have steadily eroded public trust in the government. Fedorov clearly senses that the administration is growing politically vulnerable. However, opening up a fierce election contest carries immense danger. Ukraine is already preparing for a harsh winter of heavy Russian airstrikes. Dividing the country through partisan battles right now could weaken its military defense. For the moment, the president will almost certainly reject the call for a vote. Yet the taboo around wartime elections has now been broken. If political frustration deepens, the debate over wartime democracy will only grow louder. For our final story today, we turn to American finance and global sport. A very quiet billionaire is suddenly having to sell his prized sports teams. His name is Mark Walter. You might know him as a co-owner of the Los Angeles Lakers basketball team. He also holds a major stake in Chelsea Football Club in London. For years, Walter ran a massive Wall Street firm called Guggenheim Partners. At its peak, the firm managed hundreds of billions of dollars. Walter built this empire by changing how insurance companies handle their cash. Insurance companies collect steady payments from millions of ordinary customers. Traditionally, insurers keep that money in safe, low-risk government bonds. Those bonds are very safe, but they pay relatively low returns. Walter offered a different path to insurers seeking bigger profits. He convinced them to put their money into riskier private investments instead. The idea worked brilliantly for a long time. It generated huge fees and allowed Walter to buy famous sporting assets. People even compared his growing business to the empire of Warren Buffett. Now, however, that entire structure is starting to unravel. Federal prosecutors in the United States have launched a formal investigation into his deals. The probe revealed a serious problem inside his network of companies. Two insurance firms controlled by Walter secretly funded his other business ventures. Together, they provided more than $20 billion in previously undisclosed financing. In effect, Walter used customer insurance funds to back his own private deal-making. That practice created immense hidden risks for the insurance companies. If his private ventures ran into trouble, ordinary policyholders could lose their protection. Using insurance money to chase higher profits is a growing trend across private finance. Yet Walter went much further by hiding huge transactions between his own businesses. The federal investigation has now forced him to clean up his books immediately. To fix the balance sheets of his insurers, Walter needs cash fast. Because of this, he has agreed to sell his stake in the Lakers. His valuable shares in Chelsea Football Club are also on the market. It is a striking retreat for a man who once seemed untouchable in sports. The big uncertainty now is whether other private investment firms face similar troubles. That brings us to the end of today's stories. Thank you for sharing your breakfast with me, and I will see you tomorrow morning.